All right, welcome everyone to our Cross Creek Ag Solutions 2024 Outlook meeting. Just like to thank everyone that's here today. So this is a two-day meeting. We'll have the same material tomorrow as we have today. I know we've got some people from multiple states, Wisconsin, Illinois, and the surrounding areas locally here. So appreciate everyone, appreciate the drive. My name is Kyle Brumley. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm the Agronomic Sales Manager here at Cross Creek. It's not on. All right, this is great.
There you go. I'll just click it for you.
Oh, it's working now.
I just clicked.
All right, a couple housekeeping things just to get started. We do not have restrooms out here. If you guys need to use the restroom, it's up in the main shop. Just walk in the front doors, they're unlocked. Second door on the right. As we go through the sessions today, each of you will have a time to ask a few questions, but we ask that you hold most of them for the end of everyone's presentations today. We're going to do a group panel. You guys will have time to have everyone. They can kind of discuss amongst each other what questions you may have. On your tables in front of you, there's a piece of paper that you can submit any questions for that panel. That way we don't all have to ask in front of each other. There's a box back on the 40/20 where you can put those. Or if not, just find me to the side. I can write it down and ask it as well.
I'll say one thing, Kyle. No, they're not passing the 40/20
Also on the table in front of you, there is a hardback copy of our 2024 program book. We are still in the process of getting more of these made and shipped in. So for today, we just ask that if you'd like to have a copy now before we have a chance to meet with you, there's a QR code on the back that will take you to the digital version of this book. We've also got discount schedule. Once again, all of this is just getting rolled out, so we'll have a chance individually to sit down with each of you, but just so you guys can see it today. As well as new for us this year, something that we haven't had in the past is we're offering John Deere financing. So if you've already got a line of credit with them and would like to apply to put purchases on that, that's also available. And as a special thanks to everyone here today, we're offering a 5% discount that will be extended through February 15th to anyone that's at the meeting here today. So just thanks for that. I'd like to call out the members of the Cross Creek team to get started here. So you guys all know Brad, President and CEO, Director of Sales. Marcia, Brad's wife, she will be here later. She's not here at the moment. Vice President, Head of Office and Accounting Staff. Myself, Agronomic Sales Manager. Spencer Day sitting at the table here, Operations Business Manager. Jason is in the back, I think. Okay, they got the most important job today. They're cooking lunch. Inventory, Spreading Manager, and Farm Specialist. And then Gabe Hudson, Farm and Facilities Manager. And then because I am newer here to Cross Creek, I think I know pretty much all of the seed customers now, but there's still a lot of the bionutritional customers that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. So I've been here at Cross Creek since March of this year. My wife, Sarah, I've got two little girls, Kennedy and Emerson. I live in Pendleton, Indiana, so just about 35 minutes straight south of here. A little on my background, so agronomy degree from Purdue. Out of Purdue, I spent a couple years at Monsanto. Spent the bulk of my career at Beck's. I covered the east central side of the state. So the counties that would be just immediately east of here. That's how Brad and I originally got to know each other. After I left Beck's, I did some private agronomy work, covering both row crop, specialty crop, and some organic for a couple years. And then Most recently, other than my role here, I worked for a company called Pattern Ag, doing kind of a unique spin on soil testing, looking not so much at the chemical properties of the soil, but more of the biological aspect through genetic markers, looking for pest pathogens and all of that. So that's just a little bit about me. So let's get started on today. So, kind of one of the elephants in the room is what happened this year. So anyone here, from June, July until the time the combine rolled, experienced some yields that weren't quite what we expected. Not bad, but not that all-out record that we all thought. Anyone kind of in that category?
Those are records.
I'll take that as a yes then. So yeah, like I said, June, July, I know many of you guys were out in your fields. We were out in the fields. You had private agronomists out there. We were showing potential, total OVL counts in the corn for, mid to upper 200s. It wasn't there. What happened to it? That's the question that we're going to try to answer today. So the biggest things we saw, just overall inconsistent yields, large swings between soil types, planting date, and hybrid. On average, I think it's pretty safe to say that our low ground, our ground with higher organic matter, the ground that we typically see the yield come from, fell off some this year. Early May planting, which most of us have the most success with, also fell off to the late April or late May planting. Then again, this is on average. There are some isolated areas where this isn't the case, but on average, that's what we're seeing. Huge variations in hybrids this year. We have it every year. We see it. That's why we do side-by-sides. That's why we test against different things. But this year, we're seeing 20, 30, 40, even higher bushel swings between separate hybrids. Then again, why? So it all started at planting. This is the one that I forgot about, Brad forgot about, I think many of us aren't thinking about. So it goes back to that early May planting. We had some wet weather. We felt like we were under the gun. We had a little bit of a window starting there, May 3rd, probably May 4th is when most of it started. A lot of us went hard. We were afraid we might not have a window to go again, so we went. Conditions were marginal at best. It looked dry on top, dust was flying, everyone was going. But if you really step back and think, it was still pretty wet underneath. And not only was it wet, it was cold. We were causing some sidewall compaction. I think a lot of us turned a blind eye to it. And then again, this is kind of locally, but on May 7th, we had a plus 1 inch rainfall event followed by a cold snap there, which is, as you guys all know, not great early in that corn plant's life. It led to uneven emergence, chilling injury, and really was the prime environment for disease, setting ourselves up for kind of the domino effect of what's to come. So these two pictures here, kind of prime examples of chilling injury. Pictures from this field right here. This field was planted May 4th and did have that rainfall event. So you can see corn came up, got some disease in it, started dying off, or germed, but never even came up. These two pictures here are from the same field about a month later at side dress time. Same thing, we're starting to see some of the sins of what we did at planting. So that is step one, and I think the thing that none of us realized until it was too late. Step number two kind of comes in mid to late August. So August 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th, we had rain all 4 days. If you guys remember, that's that first hurricane that came up. So out of that event, we had 1.59 inches. Not a terrible amount of rain over 4 days, especially in August, but it's still kind of untimely to get that much rain kind of mid to late August. And then just a quick side note as we're talking through some of the data and numbers here. 2017 or 2024 total for that field where those pictures came from and all of the numbers I'm giving you was 17.92 inches, 23 total, 13.81 inches. So along all the other issues, we're setting about 5 more inches of rain than normal, which we think is a good thing typically, but there are some situations and some circumstances that we're talking about that led to that not being a great thing. So that rainfall event was step 1. What was more detrimental is step 2. You guys can all remember after that rain stopped, we had the wind and everything. It got cold for 3 days. So August 21st, 22nd, 23rd, high of 71, low of 48 for 3 days. And it didn't get up to 70 until later in the afternoon. So we were setting 40s, 50s in saturated soil in the middle of August for 3 straight days. So what did that do? Here's another thing that I don't see a lot of people talking about. Maybe many of us in the room have never heard of before. Red root rot. So what is that? That is a root disease, much like what we're used to with some fusariums, some early season root rots, diseases like that. But it is something that the infection and the damage is happening later in season. And really what sets it in is that cold snap that I'm talking about. So, and again, I said it was unique, that weather event, which is why red root rot is unique. I've only seen it one other time in this general geography in my career. That was in 2016. Brad, to the best of his knowledge, had never seen it in really central Indiana or the surrounding areas before. It's more prevalent on the eastern side, so eastern Pennsylvania into the Delmarva region. That is typically where we're seeing this disease. So, symptoms of it. Root mass is reduced, rotting below ground can lead to wilting, grayish-green foliage, premature death, and lodging within 4 to 5 days. I think a lot of us saw that this year. Occurs at early mid-silking, but mainly late in the growing season. Then again, we had phenomenal potential. We had phenomenal looking crops up until the end when we didn't. Plant senesces as the disease develops, moderate temperatures, there's that weather event that we talked about, and high yielding environments, high populations, high fertility, or irrigation. So then again, the question that I posed at the beginning, why is the lower lying ground falling off? Those areas that we typically expect to have better yields, where did it go? So we've got planting, we've got the weather event, which led to this red root rot. Here's some evidence from the field. So 2 of these pictures are from our problem field that I showed you pictures of earlier. This picture here is from a completely different field, completely different brand and hybrid that we were planting about 12 miles east of here. You can see why they call it red root rot here. You've got the reddish lesions in the roots as well as up into the crown, as well as just overall kind of smaller root mass, root decay, root death. Number 3 on the list, the heat and drought. So we had adequate to perfect growing situations through June and July, which is why we saw that phenomenal yield potential. Some of our problems were there already. They were underlying, but they were masked because we were getting 4.2 inches of rain and 4.7 inches in June, 4.78 in July. Really, we had no, other than I think a 1-inch rain, we didn't have one big event through that time frame. It was just a nice 3 to 4 tenths here and there every week to 10 days that kept us going. We had adequate heat, but it wasn't too hot, just overall about perfect. So with such high yield potentials, right after that weather event in August, we went into what we all probably remember because it's the most recent in memory is heat and drought. So we had extremely high potential. That plant was in reproductive mode. It was trying to fill that ear, protect its ear, and go on to the next generation. So when that happens, we've got cannibalization. So we've already got compromised roots below the ground. We've got some issues in some areas from planting. We've got high yield potential. Now we've got the plant cannibalizing itself. So stock quality was compromised, as well as those plants remobilizing carbohydrates to complete grain fill. So another stress on the plant, another thing that's taking away yield, another thing that as we get farther in the season is leading to some of our stock quality issues, some of our downed corn. And the fourth thing, the thing that everyone's heard about, probably the thing that I hear the most, is what everyone is blaming all of our issues on this year. So tar spot. Yes, it was here. Yes, it was bad. It moved in late. Timely applications of fungicide paid dividends this year. However, the key word there is timely. Many of us hit it right. I know there's someone in the audience now that we looked at a lot of their fields. A few of them, they hit it right, and it really paid dividends. But in some of the other areas where we didn't hit it right, it was probably too early with, 14 to, maybe close to 20-day, time period there. If we would have put it on there before brown silk or earlier and didn't come back with another application, by the time the tar really moved in, it was probably not that great of a benefit for us. Main impact of yield with tar: poor ear weight, poor kernel fill. Combine that with the heat and the drought, now we've got two things working on that ear weight and that tip fill. So my conclusion, kind of what I'm getting at with all of this, is like what we just talked about. Tar spot has been pegged as kind of public enemy number one this year and the cause of all of our issues. Was it part of the equation? Absolutely it was. However, we think it's only one chapter in a longer book, a longer story that we're trying to tell. We've got the compromised roots at planting. We've got unusual weather events leading to below ground issues. Heat and drought leading to cannibalization, reduced kernel weight, and then tar spot leading to continued yield losses, and then really having free range to finish those plants off. Tar spot is a disease that progresses rapidly, causes defoliation. Really that just kind of goes to reduce photosynthesis and kill that plant off. So if that plant is already essentially dead below the ground, the stalk's already compromised because of the heat and the drought and it cannibalizing itself, and then tar starting from the top and going down, it was basically just a death sentence. We harvested corn earlier than we typically harvest and a lot drier than we typically harvest this year. So red root rot, then again, it's rare in this part of the world, hasn't been seen with severity since 2016, and our weather continues to be erratic, but the events in mid to late August are not typical. So those are really the four items that we can put our finger on to really say, where did our yield go? So.
I think the sad thing is, you hit on it. Many of you, we've walked along your fields, we've talked to you, some of you haven't, some of you guys are new to us. I think the big thing is there's so many things we did right this year, to offset some of the challenges we had early. And you look in July, when we look at stand counts and kernel counts by pollination, and like you said, we were sitting at one of the most largest potentials. I mean, there's an ethanol plant up here in Marion that went out and did a 25-mile area, yield check in first week of August, and their number was 20% higher than it's ever been. And you look at the oatmeal count we all produced, it was there. But we had kind of powered through, and those of us that spent a lot of money on plant health, soil health, and trying to power through it, we had survived two of the problems. For the last two is what just killed it all. I mean, you can survive for a while, but then you can't just keep striking out and try to bat 750. got to the end, what we were really charged with and what we wanted to present to you guys is this. A lot of people kept asking questions, and to your point, Kyle, there's a lot of people said, oh, it's tar spot. Tar spot's the only reason we had this issue. And in my career, I've never seen a leafy seed ever take a crop out by itself.
No, we've seen the past few years, I mean, tar spot has been getting worse, and we've seen, you know, in some isolated areas, some drastic yield reductions from it, but it has been I'll call it a slower death. It's taken a little bit longer. The disease hasn't progressed as fast. That was the big difference this year is, I don't have the pictures on here, but Brad and I made a video doing some mid-season checks. The field that we were in was completely green, completely healthy. We were starting to see a few speckles on the leaves, but nothing that I would say warranted any concern yet. And was it 10, 12 days later, Brad? That field was dead, brown, and gone.
That's the understanding. We pulled a 180 and we're like, I don't know what's happening. But we weren't looking below ground. We were paying attention above ground. We missed it.
So that concludes that. Any questions from anyone? Sounds good. We got Brad up next. He's going to go through some of our 2024 data.
I need some walk-up music like AC/DC Thunderstruck or something. Makes it a lot more interesting. So while we're doing this transition here, I'm going to ask a question. How many of you believe tar spot actually blows in, or is it just a pustule and spore that actually resides in your soil? And hold on, I'm not really smart enough to get all these put on me, right? Yes, sir. Corn aphids or bean?
So we went and sprayed for aphids. Well, while we're at this fungicide on this, tar spot wasn't even on our radar at that point. Boy, did that turn out to be a good thing.
Aphid, corn aphid.
We sprayed the aphids, but we also did the and we put on the fungicide and we were mainly up the aphids.
Anybody?
That was a big deal compared to what we spray at the same time. We seem to do it early, not fungicide, but earlier than that.
So you did? Kyle, I don't remember seeing too many walking. Mm-hmm. Monty, did you see any in Illinois?
Aphids were a bigger problem this year, driven by sugar status in the plants and 3 cool days you're referring to really shut down photosynthetic activity, peak photosynthetic demand. So as bricks drop below 8%, you'll have aphids come in that typically can keep your bricks up in the plant that's toxic to them. So if you see aphids on your farm plant, you have low sugar status, and it's pretty widespread this year.
Does anybody know or anybody have a question what Brix levels are? Don't feel bad if you don't. Yeah. Yeah, so Brix levels, sugar content, right? Bring it up to what your sugar load is. All of us, I mean, anybody that's on insulin or has, diabetes understands what sugar loads in our body. Well, think about the plant. Plant has to have sugar. It's a building block, right? It's how you build cell walls, carbon. I mean, it's carbon, right? So keeping sugar levels up are always a good thing, but also it has to be regulated to the plant. And that's a whole other topic for a whole other day for hours of long fun and chemistry. But that's one thing we've tried, and really, we'll kind of show you some data here. We've tried to really pay attention of every application we do has a sugar source in it. And I'll just tell you this, sugar is not sugar. Everybody thinks, I can go over here to Walmart and buy a tote of sugar and just dump it in. You will find out there are multitudes of different sugars out there, and how the plant metabolizes those is very uniquely different. Because we've had a lot of people say, I tried sugar. I went and bought, dextrose and solubilized it and put it on my plants and did nothing. Well, they expected one application. It's like me having diabetes and taking an insulin shot once a month and expect that it's going to do something, right? No, I mean, it's not. So it's a constant work at that. It's also understanding what levels you want to use and what form you want to use. But getting back to that tar spot question, the reason why I brought it up is I was walking up here and looking at that root box, and we kind of followed what Bex had been doing for the last 2 years. They've been actually cataloging hybrids and looking at roots. And we got the crazy idea, let's take a look at planting the same hybrid, but treating it differently with 2 different treatments. What would happen? Would the roots actually grow differently within a hybrid? Would we see different expressions? And so what you see up there is, I don't know if this pointer, yeah, it works. You actually see 2 different plants. It's actually 6064 AM, which is a 110-day hybrid from Bex planted. But there is a different treatment on this side than there is on this side. And we're not going to release those yet because we tried something uniquely different. But when you grow it in a medium that has no CECs, no organic matter, it's brick dust. You go to your local softball field, we fill that thing full of brick dust. And I will tell you, trying to grow these outside versus in a greenhouse is a real pain in the ass, okay? It is not easy. We actually had to replant this one. They both came up together, and about V5, V6, this side over here, because we planted 2 hybrids or 2 seeds so we could at least get one good, right? And then all 4 came up and really great, and we decided, okay, we're going to choose one of these. We chose one. Well, guess what? By the time we got to V4, V5, it was dead. I will also tell you the amount of water. So we ran a drip tape on the top, the garden hose that has like the soaker hose. We ran that all through there so it had unique and uniform nutrients. We piped in the nutrients through that. And I will tell you, the amount of water it takes to grow is staggering. You could leave that, you could soak that whole entire cage. We welded up 2 cages and Gabe put that together so we could have that. You could leave that hose on for 5 hours and it finally would get enough water in to fill what we needed. And then by 9 o'clock that night, it was dry. It was mind-blowing how much water it took to grow those. So we're going to come up with some new ideas next year to do it. The interesting thing is, yeah, you can see some root differences. We noticed some things that we kind of cataloged, but this one was behind, obviously from a replant situation. But what was interesting, this treatment over here, if you count up the ears it put on, it actually put on 7 ears. Not to say that really mattered what we were trying to do. This one over here only put on a couple. We're going to get more over time figuring this out and doing a better job of how do we do this. I think we're going to mix in an actual granular humic source to increase the CEC and actually have some carbon in there mixed in with the brick dust. So that's a dry product. So we'll actually have some holding capacity, maybe to hold on to nutrients, just to see what will happen. And I think also our watering system, instead of watering from the top, we're going to figure out, can we actually bury some pipe into it and actually water, a foot down into it to be able to keep that from evapotranspirating, blowing up in the air. But getting back to my original topic, what I brought this up for is tar spot. These were actually back here at our dike facility. And yes, we had corn within 100 feet that way and 200 feet this way. But everybody says, tar is inside your field. It blows up in the pustule of the ground and it proliferates inside your field and spreads. And we've heard all kinds of reports. Tar spot doesn't blow in the wind. It doesn't blow in. I've heard people, it blows forever. Well, this thing was planted in a medium that had no tar, it's brick dust, right? There should be no disease in that, right? I'm sure there's some microbiome that's going on, but nothing much. Well, these plants were riddled with tar and nowhere near corn. So it does blow. How far it blows, great question. But it was interesting to see in that medium that we actually got tar spot and it came in super late, just like it did in our corn, because these were actually healthier than our cornfields once we saw them dying down, which makes me wonder, these didn't have root disease issues going on, right? Kyle talked about that one leg, part of that 4-legged stool. There was no disease pressure there. They didn't go through that chilling part near as bad because they were planting a medium that was, it couldn't cool down like it stayed warmer. So that's two legs. I will tell you, when we got into the heat and the drought, we thought we were going to lose these plants multiple times, and we were watering all day long. We never shut it off. It was just constant water all day long. We had water running out the bottom and just keep it going. We've got to be able to, because they would dry out so fast. We had relative humidity, 20% some of those days. It was the Sahara Desert. But what was interesting is when I talk about tar came in super late on these plants compared to the rest of the cornfields. Everybody else was starting to get it, and it was probably a good 3 weeks later before it got it. So I'm kind of wondering, and into the conversation we talked about, if we hadn't had those two legs of that stool we dealt with early on inside of our fields that we planted in central Indiana, and the Midwest, would we have actually seen tar be an issue, or would it have been so developed late that it wouldn't have been as big of an issue? Do I think it possibly could have been? Well, okay, if we go to DeMont, Northwest Indiana, what's the town I'm thinking of? What's that? DeMont. Okay, so that's like the epicenter of tar spot every year. They get tar nonstop. You talk to the guys? Yeah, you talked to them this year? None. They're like, what are you talking about? First year we haven't had to deal with tar ever. Yet, to their point, they were experiencing record yields. They were getting the 260, 270, 280 field averages. Interesting. Not saying tar caused this all, it's part of that whole entire book we're building here, but they didn't have that issue. And also, they were a little bit earlier planted and later planted. They were April because they were drier through that area, and there was a rainfall event that happened in Northwest Indiana and then moved on to that later part. So it's interesting to see that as you travel and hear different people, different areas and what's going on. But I think everybody has to realize everybody wants to throw the dart at one thing. That's the thing that we've heard more this year than anywhere else, is everybody wants to throw the dart and say, this is the one problem that was our issue. Well, I think you have to step back for a minute, whether it's corn, beans, or anything you raise, and say, what are we dealing with? Because all of us every year are dealing with a multitude of different things. So let's roll into the data. And I'm glad I need to throw a curtain up there or something. So what we're going to show you, we're not going to go through everything. This has actually not been released. Starting next week, this will be released on our website. So you'll be able to pull up the 2024 data. And I want to set the stage for you guys to really understand what's going on. And I'm not going to read that because that's you can read it in your spare time when it comes out. We personally, on the 5 counties that we farm in, have testing on every single field that we farm. And I want you guys to know, some of you guys know this, some of you don't know this. How we do our testing is just not a strip in the field. Everything, we take the indrows out, we take along the woods and around, but we take the middle of the fields and we have multiple checks within those. So if we're testing an in-furrow program against one and the other, there could be up to 8 to 10, depends on the size of the field, different checks across there. And we're taking 60-foot checks all the way across the field. So I mean, it's a very large amount of data, and what Spencer's doing, because I don't touch the data, so I want you guys to understand, this data doesn't get adulterated, it doesn't get, let's just bump that up and make it look good. I don't touch it. We do the planning, we have everything through Ops Center that goes into it goes into SMS, and then all that data goes into his software, and then once it comes out of the combine, I don't see it till we got done with it last week. So this all gets processed, so it's actually unadulterated, it's non-biased. Spencer managed it through all the software, and then it spits it out, and then I have to figure out and explain what happened or didn't happen and why. And then Kyle went back and actually looked at a lot of the fields and what the rainfall was, what the events were, what are we actually seeing, because there's some stuff you're going to see here that's really impressive and some stuff that's not. And you're like, okay, well, why? And then what we look at also is going back into the years. So we have some studies now that are 4 years old. We've got 4 years of data behind them now. When you start looking at that, some of these studies could be upwards of, a couple hundred acres that have actually got into this now, this study over a 4-year time period. So that's one thing we want to kind of set the stage for everybody, is these are not just 4-row, 40-foot or 100-foot strip trials. I mean, these are full field, multiple check data. Just keep rolling. I don't know, can I do it through this? Or is it? I can, how about that? All right, we're going to start here. There's something I'm going to roll through because I will tell you, if we go back, this is the least amount of studies we've had in our research book since I've been doing it since 2019. Reason being, I will tell you, there were about 10 to 12, I have to go back and look exactly what the number of studies we had to throw out. And the reason being is, there were some farms, when we talk about those low wet hole areas, we may have had 8 checks in there, and 6 of them were in through like the low-lying area where it wasn't drowned out and there was nothing there, but we're talking yield levels that were taking up 4 to 6 acres across the field. And it was junk. I mean, it was 100 bushel off. And so we just don't like cherry picking data, because we could have came back off that, went up to the top of the hill, took a small section of 3 acres and made it look really good or bad. And it's not fair, because it's
it's really junk data. And so we had to cut some of those out. Many of those will come back for next year, but this year it was just, there were some major challenges within some fields. I wish we had system ditching in every field, but we're not there yet. All right, so what are we gonna look at here? So first study. Anybody that's got 2x2 on their planner, we'll zoom that in maybe. See if I can get out of the way. So this is quick. We just wanted to do it again. And we actually have some multi-year data on this, but we wanted to look at, I'm sorry, not 2x2, in-furrow, my bad. In-furrow with no 2x2. So all of our in-furrow data for the previous 3 years, so 23, 22, and 21's data, all would have had the 2x2 turned on. And then we shut the in-furrow off and on. We had a request last year for one of these meetings that said, can you please shut your 2x2 off because we don't have 2x2. I just want to see what the in-furrow looks like. I said, okay, let's do it. We've never done it that way. So we've created a study just looking at 7 gallon the acre. So 2 gallon of a 923 ignition mix with Accelerate, Rev Up, Nano Zinc, and Micro AZ. Micro AZ is a inoculant. By doing all that, there's 45, 7 gallon the acre. We watered up at 4 gallons. So we got $45 an acre last year's cost in that program. And it ended up being across that, and this is in Tipton County, there was 197 versus 204. If you look at it, difference in ROI, in furrow is even more, but the problem is, didn't pay out. Cost. So that's a really good one to get excited about, right? Show everybody you can make money or not make money at 13 bucks an acre by shutting the in-furrow off. So my question is, we're going to keep doing this. We actually have other studies where you turn the in-furrow on and the 2x2. What we've seen over time, and everybody says, well, how do you look at this, defend it? How do you say whatever? What we've seen from in-furrow is, especially on years we have, where this field's at, there's no system ditching on this field. It is extremely wet, and this is on 213, just south of Windfall, if anybody knows. This is in a part of the field, and then there's 90 acres in the field. This is on a 45 of it. There's a lot of water holding capacity, water lays. And so was the in-furrow even enough? Okay, yes, there was yield there, but was it enough to offset it? We've noticed over time that our in-furrow program and many in-furrow programs we tested, getting those nodal roots established and getting out to that 2x2 is so key. So once you build this giant root system at, VE, V1, V2, V3, and it's out there and you've got all this going on and you got radical seminal roots blowing out there and the nodal roots are out there, then all of a sudden there's nothing for them to feed on. You've accelerated the microbial level in the rhizosphere around there, and all of a sudden there's no sulfur, there's no nitrogen, you've got no humics, no boron, there's nothing there for them. So these plants got side dressed later, they were starving. Even though there was a yield difference, it's still not as much as what we see the other way around when we turn the 2x2 on. So I just wanted to show you guys that. We also asked this year, somebody said, can you guys do another part of the field? So this is on the other 40. Interesting enough, this part of that 40 on the other side of the house actually has quite a bit of tiling in it. So there's probably about 30 acres of it system ditched. Interesting on this part, no in-furrow turned on, or so, controls, no in-furrow. Then everybody said, can you guys test running more? So everybody said, well, more, if your standard is 2 gallons, all we did is water up. So we watered up to 5 gallon, 7 gallon, and 9 gallon. Same mix, but we just added more water. If you look here, 5 gallon paid out the most this year. We are going to do this probably for at least another 3 years. And let me tell you, doing this test is a pain in the butt when you have to stop the tanks and go add more water and then come back and figure out your mix and go add more water and plant those 6 strips, then go fill up and go to, it sucks, okay? It's not a lot of fun planting this. You get 80 acres a day and that's all you get done. Our theory last year when we played around this, we actually tested 7 versus 9 and we didn't have the control, but we saw by adding more water last year, if you go back to our 2023 data, it actually increased and we made more ROI by the more water that we added. Now, there's a couple of reasons we got, and we kind of think behind this, kind of the hypothesis, right, of what's going on. If anybody ever ran their in-furrow or anything on their planter, whether you're spinning your manual wheel or you got a hydraulic wheel, at 5 gallon in a 30-inch row, what's it look like coming out your stream at the bottom? Just a dribble and a little sputter, right? So we saw that and we were like, okay, that doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. I'm spending $40 an acre running through the middle. and I'm getting just a controlled spill basically. So we went up to 7 gallon, and you could now see a fairly steady stream. When we went to 9 gallon, it was blasting out there. I mean, it was just even stratification. My question is, that this year being as wet as it was and the challenges, were we already saturated enough in the soil? You wouldn't think an extra 2 to 4 gallons make a difference. I'm not sure, but I will say the even distribution is a key part. Monty, you got any comments on that from an in-furrow or anybody else that's ran an in-furrow program of why that would be a good thing to add more water and more concentration? Or sorry, your concentration is the same, it's just distribution is different. I'm knocking the socks off y'all. We will continue this one. I think this is interesting to see over time. If we can get 3 years of data on this through wet years, dry years, and normal, well, what is normal anymore? There is no normal. But if we can take a look at this and see what happens, my question is, it's really cheap to add water. And I will say this. Yes? No, you're right.
Why don't you just have a small orifice so there's more pressure in the system and you get an equal distribution with less gallons?
Great question. The V-Apply HD is a challenge.
I mean, if you're getting an intermittent dribble, just reduce the orifice size
And pressure up.
and you'll have continuous stream, so you don't need those extra gallons.
It's a great question. I need to look at the V-Apply HD and see if we can actually change that spring and orifice in there. I don't know, Monty, you're behind that.
So, I didn't want to get in the weeds here, but there's a lot of difference in what your mechanism is that you deliver to the row. So if you have a totally tubular, it goes down in front of the wear part.
That's what this is.
Orifice is up top, and then you do have that stream exiting the orifice, but then it is a free pressure drop to the bottom that causes those. The second thing is keep the seed firmer, same thing. You know, you're off the back of the tail, and you actually wind up with a little bit of dirt between the seed and the material. So sometimes when I keep the seed firmer, you'll see more of an advantage to the higher gallons. Where totally tubular that's underneath the seed, you don't typically see it unless you're in drier, average to dry moisture conditions. The only mechanism I'm aware of is a furrow jet that has an orifice at the bottom, the very exit point. So your orifice has to be at your exit point to get that steady stream.
So you just have to take your totally tubular, weld the bottom of the tube shut, drill a small hole in it.
I have seen where they put stream jets in the bottom of those, but it's so big, it's like a quarter-inch pipe jet that it's a nightmare waiting to happen there. There's a reason why we got openings at the bottom so the dirt build up, but setting down the planter by accident, not moving and stuff like that. The furrow jet works because it winds up being about an inch above the seed drench, so if somebody happens to set down the planter while it's not moving, you're not jamming dirt up into it. That wing design actually kind of prevents dirt from getting shoved up that.
Oh, we have that issue. We know we have that issue. We know when we fill, we can't put the planter down. Or if you do, you put it down and as you're driving forward. Otherwise, you shove dirt up in there, and then it's a problem. Okay, this is one that's more exciting here. So for years, we've done this program and looking at different programs in furrow. What we had new this year is where we actually shut it off and ran it as a control. So the control up here is no in-furrow at all. The 2x2 is turned on through all these tests, I will tell you that. Interesting, program 1, we can go through what it is, we can talk about it later if you want a sideline conversation. Program 2 is the same NPK in that starter, but then also adding in a different mechanism of phosphorus solubilization, other microbes, still having the inoculum the same on both tests and having the zinc the same on both tests. We've ran this program now, like I said, for 4 years. This year, program 2 actually was $4 an acre more in ROI. If you look over the time period of 4 years, though, program 1 is still out ROIing And we're looking at 229 versus 222 over the 4-year time period at 23 bucks an acre of ROI. The interesting thing is when you shut this off, that you now actually have a no in-furrow control. That makes it a little more easy to understand what that ROI is compared to the control. So on this, where we had the 2x2 turned on, every time it was above 26 and 30. So there was ROI each time. I think that has a lot to do with the 2x2. There's a whole lot of debate out there. You can get in arguments all day long. We could be here for a week. There's a lot of people that want the 2x2. There's a lot of people that want the in-furrow. But over time, what we found out is running both together was a much better, for what we're doing, avenue. Any questions before I go on this? Okay, so something we wanted, and we got requested this year, is planter box treatments. So guys that have, literally on corn, you have no liquid at all. So a very familiar company out there, Meristem, we actually had some people asking, can you guys test hopper throttle for us and look at just what hopper throttle does by itself, no in-furrow turned on. So we said, okay, we will actually do a control of no in-furrow, no hopper throttle, 2x2x2 is still turned on. So this is actually in Howard County where this test was ran, not too far from here. So 2x2x2, no in-furrow, no hopper throttle control. We added hopper throttle only, so no in-furrow turned on. We actually lost 10 bushel. I'm not here to throw darts at anybody, because people throw darts at us all day long, right? I'm not here to say it doesn't or does not work. This is 1 year of one testing. We just tested hopper throttle, and that was our ROI negative. Or we turned on the in-furrow by itself, we were $11 an acre ROI, so 183 versus 195. Then we thought, let's just take this one step further. Let's have the hoppers loaded with hopper throttle and turn the in-furrow on. In this field here, there's 52 acres. We ran 6 different checks of this across there. The hopper throttle at 7 gallons and the in-furrow at 7 and hopper throttle turned on was still a negative. Our thought process was there's a lot of things in hopper throttle that they're bugs in the jug, we'll say, with their dry form. We were wanting to know, could we actually feed them even more for what we're doing with our in-furrow? This is 1 year's data. We're going to probably do this again next year, if not for another 2 years, just to see. So I think it's interesting to see as guys are asking the question that don't have liquid, can we add dry additives and actually make the same return as what in-furrow is liquid-wise? I've got my own opinion. We can talk about that on the side, but we're going to test it to find out, is that legit or not? Any questions there? I'll kind of blow through this one really because we're moving this as a baseline study. For 3 years, we tested our 2x2x2 system at 15 gallon, turned off and on, and we actually have quite a bit of data on that. So we couldn't carry the multi-year data into this year. To be honest, it wouldn't be fair because it's 15 gallons versus none. If you want to go back at 23s, look at it, that data's there. We moved our 2x2 this year to 20 gallon. Because what I've learned is, and what I'm trying to get to is I'm increasing the amount of 28 I'm bringing up front and also increasing the amount of sulfur. So we actually are now running 4 gallons of ATS along with our humic source, our 2 humic sources of Enhance and Humica, along with the boron. So by doing that, we wanted to increase the sulfur rate, and we also didn't want to have to apply as much come side dress. So we moved that 20 gallon load up. Yes, we're filling up more at planting time, but it's also making it nice where we're cutting back basically another 30 pounds of N at side dress. That we're being more efficient with the N we're using. Over time, we used to be about, overall usage, about 80 gallons total we were putting on. We're back down to 65 now. And I think over time, we maybe will even put that down further because our limiting factor is not nitrogen. We're learning our limiting factor actually, if I had to choose one thing right now, is sulfur and boron. And how do we utilize those even more? So we're spending more money on sulfur and ATS than we are 28 now. But I'll blow through that. That's kind of what we're doing. This will be a baseline study going forward. Here is something that we did last year, and we got asked to do it because if you go back to 23's data, in our 2x2x2 system, we wanted to study humics. So we really believe in 2 humic acids that are out there on the market, Humica and Enhance. And last year, if you go to our 23 data, we actually tested each one of them at a pint rate, and then we combined it together. And there was a huge ROI response by combining them together. Our question was it just because we increased it from 16 ounces to a quart, or was there synergistic effect happening between both products? And so we separated out this year for the first time. And so the control is 20 gallons with no humics in there. So it's ATS, 28, and boron. So then we put the humic acids in there in a standard app of 16 of humica and 16 enhanced. So a full quart. And you look right here, I mean, it was 185 versus 198 at a $50 an acre ROI. Then we went and did the strips with just 16 ounces of humica, $67 an acre ROI. But if you look at the yield went up. 16 ounces of enhance went up another 3 bushel. The highest ROI, because of the cost of enhance, is less than the cost of humica. Then we said, well, let's run a quart of humica by itself. Still better than control, but less of an ROI, and the 32 of enhance, still better than control, but not too far off the ROI. So there's 2 things going on there. The cost of the product is obviously a big deal. We all understand that for going forward in 2025. Our cost per acre, what essentially is going to be our cost per bushel to raise this crop, is going to be probably at the all-time high of awareness, right? And I'll talk about that later on this afternoon. But in doing so, we found out this year a 16 ounce enhanced was the highest ROI, and what ended up being the highest yield level too. We will continue this study. If you thought the in-furrow study was a hard one, that was even worse, because you're dealing with high volume in gallons and having to bring multiple totes in makes it even challenging. So we'll keep doing this up. Our question is, and it's not really so much comparing the products, so I think each one has their unique usage within everybody's operation. But when you got the cost of enhance is about 60% of what the cost of humic is, it made a big difference on ROI. So we're going to go forward looking at, what's the best option for you guys. We've scoured the scorched earth looking at different humic acids. These are the best 2 that we've come across to this day. And I know there's a lot of people that have a lot of different humic acids out there in the world. I think there's really 2 questions you got to ask, guys, if anybody's selling humics. What's in it and why? Because not all humics are created equal. And everybody says, well, mine's a 6%, mine's a 12, mine's a 20. That doesn't mean a lot. That's like me handing you a jar of sand and a jar of number 2 rock. It's all rock. It all comes out of the earth. But your pore space and your CEC and anionic exchange capacity is all the difference in the world. You need to know what those are within those products to understand what their capacity is. Because I can buy a 12% humic out there that has 100 CEC, and I've got a lot of junk. I got a parking garage full of a lot of used cars that are broke down that I can't use. I want a parking garage that's wide open that has a lot of exchangeable sites that I can park a lot of cars in. So those are the 2 we landed on. Going forward here, this is getting to the foliar side. So interesting conversation I had with somebody last week from Brandt Chemical. It was actually what I thought was very interesting, because they were discussing the nutritional piece, and so many of us have had this conversation, we talked about a little bit ago, about bugs in a jug, microbial, the biological terminology, right? Everybody wants to sell biologicals, and we are a biological-based company, but realistically speaking, over time, we've learned that the nutritional piece is more important than even the bio part. You can spend all the money on, buying X amount of organisms to put in your soil, but every one of you guys has uniquely different soil, and there may be 6 billion organisms in that teaspoon of soil. But what's interesting is how you farm, how that farm's been treated, what's happened to that farm over the last 100 years is the soil biome, right? Just like each one of us. Every one of us has a stomach and a gut. We've got gut biome. And what's interesting is we're all human, right? Our DNA sequencing should be all the same, or, looking at our chromosomals. But our guts are uniquely different based on what we eat, where we're at, how we treated it. If you go on an all-night bender for the weekend and get drunk and then come in Monday morning, your gut biome is going to be a little different. Okay, so if we look at it, every one of us is uniquely different. Our soils are uniquely different. And farm to farm, they're uniquely different. And I think many of us get in the path and kind of get in our own way of saying, well, this farm's all the same. And I farm right across the road, and that farm's the same. It's all the same soil type. They're not. I mean, I know I'm 44 years old now. I've only been doing this for 25 years of my life, but I will tell you that it is uniquely different than the stuff we've seen in 5 to 7 years right across the road, or even microclimates within the field. I mean, you take an 80-year farmer that used to be farmed in 240s and took the fence row out. How in the world are those are different fields that got farmed by two different people over time, possibly. So what we're getting to is when we're talking to the Brant Chemical rep the other day, and we were discussing some stuff, and they were discussing what they're doing with nutritionals, and what they found out over time is the V8 to V12 rep, which we've been on this for, gosh, this is 4 years now, we've been doing this. They were talking about that was the most important time for a foliar application in the corn plant's life. And I kind of laughed. I said, well, you stealing our data from 2023 or what? Because we've been doing this for a while. And they said, well, we found out over time, when that plant's in rapid growth syndrome and you're converting those ovules and looking at how many are going to pollinate, what ears elongating, there's that going on, but there's also what's going on underneath the ground. Because when we foliar feed a plant, everybody says, well, that's great, you're doing it for the plant. The plant's not utilizing much of that. If I put 20 gallons of this on, that plant's using a very small percentage. What it's doing is it's taking it in and putting it through the root exudates. You're feeding your microbes in the ground more than you're doing anything else. And how healthy that plant is, how healthy those roots are all the importance of actually getting this foliar product or any kind of foliar product actually through the plant. So if those plants are not healthy and actually you're putting foliar on there, what percent do you get? I mean, Tony can talk to this all day long with all the tissue testing he's done across all the Midwest. I mean, there's certain levels that will spike, but then they drop off dramatically. My question is, how do you remobilize those? How does the soil regenerate them and get them back in the plant? So getting to this study, our control's no foliar application, and then you look at V8 to V12, so corn's about 4.5, 5 foot tall. Most everybody that's got a sprayer, self-propelled, can get across this still. You don't need a Hagie or a high clearance sprayer to do this. You get across there, we did it this app only. There's $160 an acre ROI just this year alone by doing this. Everybody's like, well, that's a crazy number. Well, then when we just did brown silk only at R3, so Hagie over the top only, there's still 141, so 208, 204 versus 174, no test at all. Then combine them together, it's 213. There's not near as much. Still good. Over that 4-year time period, that V8 to V12 apps, 237 versus 212. Guys, if I had one chance, if I stand in front of every corn farmer in America and said I had one chance to apply something foliar, this is the time I'm going. And I'll take arguments all day long. If you've got in-furrow and 2x2 already on your planter and your plants are healthy coming out of the ground, you've done everything you can to build that. Yeah, that V4, that young plant's a great time to do it, but it's still living off a lot of the roots and what you've put in there. When you get to that V8 to V12 time, that root structure that's underneath the ground is getting vastly different. It's spreading out, right? And if the roots are meant to grow at 15 degrees, they're probably starting to get towards your side dress or your pre-plant. Okay, so now what are we doing from this point on? I will argue that some of the things that we're doing with that V8 to V12 pass are keeping that plant healthy getting into pollination. The other part is, how many times do this time frame, usually if we're planting to the 1st of May in central Indiana, we're actually in high heat and normally high drought stress in June. Very rare do we actually get a June that's really cool and nice rainfall. Most times Junes around here are pretty high heat, high drought stress. You're doing things with potassium acetate, K-blast, draft that's got antioxidant loads and sugar loads and non-synthetic PGRs, exceed nano brown sugar, boron. You got $24 an acre in this program, which is a little less this year. But by doing this, I think when we talk about getting those, I'll get a real fancy term here, a kernel primordial set, it's determining kernel length and all the ovules that it's going to pollinate. You will start seeing the elongation and also the silk tube emergence when we get into, if I put this on V12, I'm probably within 2 to 3 weeks of getting tassel emergence or silk emergence. It is extremely important to keep your silks healthy. I mean, you can get tassel emergence, get pollen shedding all day long. Every corn plant will do it. I mean, look at sweet corn. You can beat that stuff up and it still puts pollen out, but your silk emergence is so important. And there's a whole thing, we can spend a whole day talking about silk to tassel antithesis. So when trying to match those up, because certain hybrids will actually put a silk out first before they put a tassel out. Some will put tassel before silk. But if you can marry those up to where they're actually shedding pollen and the silk emergence is correct, you now start getting these kind of ROIs because you've kept that plant healthy getting into that tassel time frame. I will also say that we're going to start looking at adding just a cheap fungicide at this time to test it, because there's a ton of data out there coming from universities. There's also some coming from some chemical manufacturers that they're saying putting on a cheap oxystrobe or a propiconazole at this time. I mean, we're looking at $5 to $7 an acre for a cheap generic that they're putting on is actually producing those kind of data as well. But then Brant, actually, as I was talking to them, they were talking about they have done testing with the nutritionals and with fungicide, and there was some synergistic effect. I'm not a big fan of blanket applying fungicides, but I am a fan of using them when we need to. And this was a clear case where this year, well, what were we doing with here and what Kyle talked about, we needed it, especially at that time frame. So more to come. We're going to keep this study up. We're going to start adding, like I said, a cheap fungicide at that time just to see what happens. This is real quick on following it up. We went back at brown silk. Once again, we talk about timing, right? This had 2x2, it had in furrow, this study. It had V4, had V10 application, and then we did it at brown silk. Control is at brown silk. There's no application of post-tassel brown silk. Then we said, let's just spray fungicide and water. We sprayed Trivapro at that, and we picked up 11 bushel by just spraying Trivapro by itself at $33 an acre. Had a response. And I will say this field where it's at in Grant County, half of it's system ditch, the other half is not, extremely wet. And this was, the pictures you were showing, this actually came out of that field. Yeah, so all that red root, we actually pulled out of this. So this had a major issue, even with red root rot still in that field. Interesting enough, when we added K-Blast, Tune-Up B, Exceed, Draft, and pH Max in the water, we still picked up yield compared to not doing anything. And the cost difference because the yield was 47 an acre. We now have 5 years of data, not with fungicide, but by itself, just the brown silk application at 15 gallon versus not applying. There's 5 years of data at 219 over 205. There's $37 an acre by doing that, no fungicide. So once again, I'm a big fan of keeping the nutritionals up on the plant and keeping that plant healthy as long as we can. But I will say, this is a year that fungicide absolutely paid out versus doing nothing. In some cases, some people saw somewhere upwards of 25, if some places 50 bushel difference. Well, interesting enough is, I think it was based on timing. Because you can go right next where they sprayed, right next door to it, and all of a sudden it was like, well, didn't see a difference. I had one guy that had a field, there was 200 acres of the field, he sprayed strips in the field, they left checks. Anderson's had it sprayed with airplane. And then right next door, planted the same day, same time, same hybrid, everything, sprayed the whole field. The strips over here showed no bushel difference at all in the strips. Over here was 25 bushel difference. It's like watching Christmas Vacation, right? She fell down a wheel, eyes went cross, got kicked by a mule, they went back. I don't know. I think that's the question, right, is what happened? But we do know over 5 years, this is paying out, and this is paying out big. We will continue to do this and work with guys that want to continue to run their high clearance sprayers with this program. All right, switch to beans real quick. This is going to go fairly quick because, everybody loves beans so much. If I was standing in front of every bean farmer in America, I had one thing to say. Everybody says, what's one thing we can do? What's one step? It's not the step, but what's one step we can do to add yield to beans and start raising higher yielding beans and get potential, is putting liquid in furrow on the planter. We've done this long enough now. I won't plant beans ever again without having liquid in furrow. And it makes guys that are planting beans really excited having to carry one more product on the planter, right? But I can go through talking about each field. Some places it paid, some didn't. I can tell you why it didn't pay in Cass County. We have been, about half our acres, we've been testing no-till cover crop for 4 years. And this field was planted into Syrah rye. That was about 6 foot tall. Kyle can tell you how much fun that is. It did not pay out ever into no-till Syrah rye. I got a couple of reasons why, but there's the data. This was conventional VT'd in the spring on stock ground, paid out. Overall, if you look at the average, that's what it is. And you take 3 years average, at 9 gallon the acre, it's 63 versus 68. There's a $26.48 or $26.40 ROI into putting in furrow on with beans. Yes, sir.
Why with the cover crop? What do you think?
I got a couple reasons. I think the main thing was distribution, and I'll be honest, when we were planting green soy rye, the seed was not getting in the trench. It was riding up on residue. This is also 50 pound the acre soy rye in the fall. Seed contact was terrible. There was sometimes when you're riding up on that soy rye, the trench was you could get on top of the ground, it's wet. It was blowing it right on top of the ground. I think erratic was the issue. The other thing is, I think there's a lot of beneficials to cover crop, but personally, it was a challenge for us to get consistency. And I mean, I can tell you, there's people in this room that are big on cover crop no-till. Hey, if you can make it work, I'm all for it. We could, I'm not saying we couldn't, there was just challenges that we had and how we're doing things, and the amount of testing we're doing to manage it for us was a big challenge. Going forward, I mean, we're gonna have some versions of no-till or just VTing, but the other part is we're going back to inline ripping once every 4 years, and then VTing or no-tilling from there. But yeah, there's some challenges. I'll be honest with you, I'll stand up here and tell everybody, there's some challenges we couldn't manage. We were spread out too far. We have too much going on with testing and all the other business. If we were 5 miles from home, it'd been a different story. When you're spread 5 counties, 30 miles that way and 26 that way and 15 that way, and not the equipment or the personnel to keep up going that much, it's tough. Yeah, I need to roll through this quick so we can get to meat and potatoes here. I don't have to worry about that. Well, I guess we can talk. This is a new study real quick. We wanted to challenge, everybody always says, guys, you guys have a standard program you like and we're running and we've had success with it. How do you guys always keep coming up with something new and challenging? Like you do 2 years of our in-furrow program, you like it, it's working for you, everything's going great, and all of a sudden I come in and say, hey, we're working on another thing. I don't want to change. Well, this is why. We're starting this. We decided to go back to a foundational idea of just using humics, sugar, and changing the pH of the water and actually doing something different in beans. So still at 9 gallon versus what our standard has been program 1. And the new program we're coming up with, this is the first year data we put behind it. I'm not holding water with this. I'm not going to tell everybody to switch everything. We're just going to start looking at different mixes and say over the next 3 years, is there something better? And especially we're going through, let's be honest, guys, I mean, it's a tight margin situation. We all know that. We're all living in it. When it's $33 an acre versus 16, we automatically have an increased ROI from day one out of the gate, even if the yield's the same. So we're going to look long term is, can we get back to some more foundational things in humic sugars and changing the pH in the water and feed the microbial base differently than what we're doing with program 1. Same thing on beans, we did this. Once again, hopper throttle was the dry box additive. People say, hey, we don't have liquid on our planter. Can you test a dry box additive versus your in-furrow? We did it. Kyle runs our bean planter, I run our corn planter. We split this and did multiple checks across this field. Interesting enough, at 9 gallon the acre, we did not check it where we had nothing. So we loaded up the planter with hopper throttle, and we turned the in-furrow off and on across these checks. Interesting enough, the baseline was hopper throttle, but when we turned the in-furrow on, we picked up $40 an acre. We will go to next year a control of nothing, no in-furrow, no hopper throttle, then hopper throttle by itself, then hopper throttle in-furrow, and in-furrow by itself. That's going to be a challenge, but I think that's the only way to tease this data out and look at it. But it's interesting. I think there's some good things maybe in what's in hopper throttle from a standpoint of microbial base, but I think what we're doing with the in-furrow was feeding that even more and why we're seeing the increased ROI through it. Beans, foliar. This is R3. It's fungicide test. Guys asked us to do this. Now we have 4 years of data now behind this. Controls nothing, no in-furrow. Trivapro by itself, so just fungicide and water. TrivaPro fungicide with our R3 app, and then our R3 app by itself. Long term, you can look at it right here. We've actually, personally, we've never got fungicide on beans to ever pay out since we've done this. Not saying it can't for some people. Now granted, these fields have our in-furrow on them. They also have an R1 app, a foliar, and then an R3 app for testing. We've yet to ever get fungicide to ever pay out on our beans. This is the first year we had a small margin to do it. If you look over time of 4 years, combine that data without TrivaPro added, so just our standard R3 app, we're picking up $48 an acre over 4 years now. We'll probably do this one more year, and then I'm probably done doing it. We'll come up with a new version of this, because after 5 years, what are you proving, right? You're seeing the same thing. It's just proven it. It works. New one, last year, we had some people ask us, when you go out and make your last application, is that your final application? The answer was yes. And somebody said, why aren't you guys spraying in August? Well, you go to the vegetable crop world, and you look at how many times they apply, or you go to the guys that are raising 150 bushel beans, ask them, because we've been in some certain circles with them over time, or the guys that are raising even 200 bushel beans, right, yield. They're asking, well, how are they doing this? Well, there's a lot of things, but guys, they're spraying them like a vegetable crop. They're going across the field 10, 12 times. So you start looking at what you're doing. Yeah, you're not going to be applying the full rates. So somebody said, well, what happens if you go out and make another application? So the third foliar application in these fields, we actually did. And interesting enough, we did it 2 years in a row by literally just K-Blast, so our potassium acetate, Tune-Up B, which is boron and yucca plant, manganese and sulfur, Draft, which is a sugar source plus also non-synthetic PGR, builds antioxidants in the plant, and then water. So at 15 gallon, we went out and did this at R4. R4, I will tell you, the last application we did was around that, right before the 15th, that rain event in August. So it was like the 12th, 13th this year of August. The year prior, it was almost like the 20th of August. So by doing this, on a 2-year average, we picked up $50 an acre ROI by just adding this application. Guys, at this point in time, you're not adding more pods. I'm not adding more seeds per pod. There's a key focus right here of this boron and this manganese and sulfur. So at R4, what are we doing? So we're trying to make sure we don't abort pods, because the plant's going to abort them no matter what. You're just trying to slow that down, right? What's the second thing we're doing? That plant's R4 to R5. It's going into R5. What's it doing? Seed weight, right? Seed size. You got to increase the boron levels, the manganese levels, sulfur levels to increase seed size. You will see by adding this application late, you will increase seed size. You will slow down that abortion. But the other part is, guys, nothing we do adds yield. The minute you pour that bag out of seed out, you're at maximum yield potential. Everything we do is protecting yield, not adding yield. If anybody says, I'm going to add 6 bushel, I didn't add 7 bushel there. We just protected 7 bushel. That's all you're trying to do. Is, I always say to everybody else, is what we're doing is we're building the wall higher. Yeah, all our guys around here will tell you, my number one thing I say is just build it 1 brick higher. That's all I need. We'll build her 1 brick higher, because we're trying to build that wall up to keep that law of diminishing returns coming down. So that's what we're doing there. Focus on that. And that is pretty much it for me. So yeah, we'll take a quick break here, and next up is going to be Tony is coming up next. We'll take a 5-10 minute break here, and we'll get rolling here soon.